So I think we'll get started. I know some of the sessions have been running a bit over today, so we might get some more people joining throughout. But welcome everyone. Thanks very much for joining. Just some housekeeping bits to get us started. So this session is being recorded. We may or may not do breakout rooms. If we do, the breakout rooms aren't recorded, but this main session is. And also captions are available. They are the auto captions which are provided by Zoom. And you can turn these on and off with the 3 dots at the bottom as required for you. And that's at the bottom of the screen. So I'll just start by introducing myself. My name is Alice Taylor. I'm a Principal Accessibility Consultant Team Leader at AbilityNet. In my role at AbilityNet, I do things like auditing against WCAG. I conduct a lot of training as well and do usability testing. But before I joined AbilityNet, I worked as a front-end developer. And now, as part of my role as a consultant, I really love to see how technology is developing, and AI in particular, I'm finding very, very interesting. So we're also joined today by Barrell from Deque. Dylan, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, my name is Barrell. I work for Deque. I've been doing accessibility for, I think this is my 15th year now. Probably most of you will be familiar with AxeCore, which is a project that I founded, open source project for accessibility testing. And I'm in charge of Deque's products. So you may know that we have quite a lot of AI built into our products, and we're increasing the amount of AI all the time. So very, very interesting topic. Not only for the way that Deque uses it, but I think just in general for accessibility. I'm very excited about this.
Thanks very much, Dylan. So as I mentioned before, this session is AI and inclusion, and it's a networking session. So this is about very much giving you an opportunity to chat about AI with the other attendees, and also just chat about some of the fantastic talks we've just had. So these were things like AI and ableism, how AI can make education more inclusive, and AI and a new era for disability services. So depending on how many people join, we may go into breakout rooms for around 20 minutes, and then 10 minutes before the end, we'll come back. And if anyone has anything they want to share with the wider group, then please do. But before we do that, we're just going to talk. Dylan and I are just going to talk about some of the kind of topics that were covered in the session before. But if anyone wants to jump in or pop anything in the chat, then please do. So the first session that was on today was about AI and ableism. So Perry Nightingale was talking a lot about the role of deep fakes, and it's interesting to hear that he was saying that it was more trusted. Deep fakes are being more trusted in advertising by consumers, and his personal opinion was around he would rather hire disabled people than have them created with deep fakes in advertising. And doesn't think that deep fakes should be the route of to achieve having more representation in advertising. So Dylan, do you have anything you'd like to share about deep fakes, or like your opinions on that role in AI?
Yeah, well, I'm not a big fan of using deep fakes in general to replace humans. I think, my strong opinion about AI is that it should be used in a human-centric way. And what I mean by that is that it should be used to make the human more efficient, more effective, and to make humans' lives better. And there's obviously a lot of interpretation in there. But I definitely think that trying to replace humans of any sort with deepfakes, unless you're trying to bring somebody back from the dead, like have Charlie Chaplin be represented in a film in that sort of generated fashion, I think we should try to stay away from that. That's my general opinion about deepfakes. I don't know what you think, Alice.
No, I mean, I think think similar to what Perry was saying around kind of having it'd be better to hire people with disabilities rather than create them with deepfakes. He was also showing some examples of men that were created with deepfakes, and pictures of men and pictures of women, and how the aging seemed to only apply to men instead of women, and that had been trained by AI. So that was a really interesting point, just around how it's AI, we have to teach it things in order for it to know things, sort of thing.
Yeah, we definitely do. I mean, AI is basically, a big statistical machine, right? So it's basically, garbage in, garbage out to some degree. And so I think a human-centric approach to everything is really the approach that we should take. I also think it's important that, in all aspects of use of AI, one aspect of it being human-centric is that the human knows when AI is being used to provide information or generate the content that they're looking at. It should be upfront, and it should be something that you don't have to guess at. So where, if deepfakes do end up getting used, or content gets generated by AI, I think it should be clear to everyone who's consuming that content that is the case. And I do think that there are steps that are being taken now by legal bodies. I think Joe Biden's AI legal stuff that he's starting to do now is actually taking steps in that direction. I think that is a good direction to go.
Yeah, it's a really, really interesting point as well, because they were also talking about how companies have almost been regulating themselves, and it's such an important thing to be considering who is actually using this technology and what guardrails are being put in place for it. So how is it being regulated? And they're also talking about the EU AI Act as well, and how that is targeted to come into force from June 2024. And that would talk about the risks of those systems. But one of the positives that the panelists were talking about was the Microsoft Copilot, and how that could be a real game changer for people with disabilities. Do you want to share any thoughts on Microsoft Copilot, Dylan?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Copilot is, it's one of the best tools that I've used as a developer. I was using it during the beta program in particular. I don't do that much coding anymore, but it's a really great tool for developers in general. It can really take a lot of the drudge work out of programming, the repetitive stuff, and essentially automate that away. And then because of the sort of new interaction model that it provides inside what, kind of a standard editor, it opens up the possibilities for people with different type of abilities to use, for example, speech as a way to write code, right, to inspect code, right? So I think it's a very good example of some of the creative ways that AI can really make our experiences richer, and once again more efficient. I think Copilot for me is the poster child of one of the best ways that AI can be used, because what it's really doing is still putting the human in the center of things. It's not automatically writing the code without the human giving it commands, and it's always giving the human the ability to accept the code that's being presented, and then ultimately edit the code that's being presented. So I think it's a really great example of both a use of AI for expanding the capabilities of people with disabilities, but also just generally putting humans in the center of the experience, and allowing them to control that.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, I think I accidentally asked you about GitHub Copilot then, so my mistake, because on the talk they were talking about the Microsoft one, about which is running the AI in the corner of the screen. But
the same principle applies to actually all their Copilot. I mean, Microsoft is using Copilot across all of their products, right? So they've integrated into every aspect. And I think the same principle does apply to pretty much all the uses of it. Is it's really a good example of putting the human in the center. Yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, some of the examples they were talking about were how it can be used to summarize content as well, and help with numbers, which is a complete game changer for people with disabilities as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you know, ultimately, regardless of what's generating the content, I think I read in the New York Times last week that there was a study that found that AI is much more creative than humans. You know, so I think large language models in particular are one of their best uses is in helping us to be creative. But on the flip side of that is that they're not very accurate. And so depending on the temperature that you give the model, it'll generate you know, something that's wildly different each time, or it can generate something that's consistent. But even that consistent answer that it's generating or output that it's generating isn't guaranteed to be accurate, right? So I think that's something that we need to realize about these, is just understand how they work, and that if the task that you're trying to complete is something very creative, it can be wonderfully you know, productive and add to your you know, help you generate great ideas, but then don't rely on it for accuracy, because that's where you're going to fall down. And when it comes to code generation, for example, one of the things that Ed Summers was saying at the M&A conference is that you know, he recommends that people use it, but especially for accessibility, but just in general, make sure that you're also testing the code. Don't just rely on the output that the Copilot gives you. And I think that same thing applies across the board to all sort of uses of that technology for a Copilot type application.
Absolutely. And I think Sarah, is it? Did you have your hand up? Would you like to add something?
Yeah, I did briefly. So I was thinking of it from an ADHD point of view, where you can be overwhelmed by the size of a task. And actually, then it can be really useful in breaking something down into chunks. I can then let my brain go, and I can know what's next, and I can move on, and it stops me getting stuck. So using like the AI, then asking it the questions then to get to the next step is really useful. It doesn't take away the creativity. It just gives me the nudge. That's all.
Oh, thank you very much for sharing that, Sarah. So I guess around, yeah, like summarizing and helping you with the task. So yeah, that's a really, really interesting point, just around like it can be used so effectively for things like that.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dylan.
No, I was just agreeing. I was completely agreeing with that. You know, I think as we're starting to play with this sort of technology in helping people to address accessibility concerns, one of the things we found useful is getting the large language model to kind of describe what it thinks the problem is first, before it tries to help you solve the problem. So it can be very good at kind of describing the problem, summarizing the problem, but also then you know, suggesting steps to take to address that.
Absolutely. As we're quite a small group today, does anyone else have anything they'd like to share that they took away from that talk, or anything they found particularly interesting about it?
Hello. Oh, hello. Hello. Hi. It's not really related, but I have a question about AI and sort of design and how that can help with inclusion. I'm wondering about how, in terms of like building accessible designs, is there much in the way of is there much that AI can do to help with sort of automatically flagging colors that don't have the right level of contrast or things like that? I'm not very up to date with like how AI can help with accessibility testing. So I'm just wondering what sort of tools I can use to help with like just generally accessibility testing using AI.
So are you interested in accessibility testing at the design phase, or are you interested more broadly in accessibility testing?
More broadly, but I'm wondering specifically about things that it can flag automatically that that tools currently do, but I'm just wondering if there's much in the way of improvements in this, because I've been sort of out of the game for a year or so.
Yeah, I think just in general for accessibility testing, there's quite a lot that AI can do, and there's different types of AI. I think there's a lot of buzz right now around these large language models, but there's actually other technologies out there, things like computer vision that ranges from object detection all the way through to OCR and that sort of thing. That really can help quite a lot in various different ways, because obviously a lot of accessibility is about making sure that different people with different abilities in terms of their senses are getting the same experience, so they're getting the same information conveyed to them. So where where you can use computer vision to sort of interpret the experience, and then you apply that to heuristics to sort of compare what that experience is to people with other types of abilities. That's a great way that this can be applied in general. Taking large language models these days can deal with both text and images, and so doing things like being able to ask a question, do you think that this image description describes the image accurately, are things that can be done. And the flip side of that as well, in terms of creation of experiences, large language models are pretty good at describing images, and that can be a great way of making a much more efficient generation of images when you're creating content as well. So there's a lot of areas that are being explored, and some tools like our tools, for example, already employ some of these techniques to try to make accessibility testing more efficient and more accurate. And I'm excited about the possibilities that are upcoming, because I think there is a lot of opportunity out there on the testing side for sure.
Okay, cool, interesting, thank you. So it's about using like a range of different tools to do the job, as it has always been, but just they've got more capabilities now. Yeah,
there's a lot of I think there is, of course, in the research phase, there are models where these are huge models, even bigger than some of the large language models that we have today, which they think the researchers think at some point might be able to do multiple tasks. So you would have a single model that can do computer vision and large language and a whole bunch of other things, but we're not there yet today. So today, the sort of state of the art right now is to use a lot of different models for different things, and then to tie them together in intelligent ways. So, but we might get to the point where there is this artificial general intelligence, which is essentially a single model that can do a lot of different things, but we're not quite there yet. Could take 5 years, could take 50 years. Who knows?
That's part of the fun, isn't it? All right, thank you very much. That's really interesting.
Thanks, Harriet. And just to add to that as well, just what Dylan was saying about images as well, like the AI, it could help you generate that alt text for your image, and that could be really useful to help speed up that process, but it still does need that human review to actually make sure, is it correct in the context, is it accurate? As best practices around the length of alt text as well. So you might have like a very wordy piece of alt text generated by AI, but then actually, it would probably summarize it as well. But in terms of the context of if that's when it should be used, would require that human review.
Cool. Okay. So it's like working in partnership with AI.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's I think that's where we're at now. It's
Yeah.
a fantastic tool that you can use to kind of support, but it does need that human review.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
it's amazing though, because even a year ago it felt like it was not as sort of part of the mainstream as it is now. So it's exciting to be getting back into it.
Yeah, I mean, that I think, Alice, is the core principle of what Microsoft is calling the co-pilot approach, is that it's really a co-pilot. It suggests things to you and can help you with things, but ultimately you're responsible for the end product. And I really like that. I really like that approach in general. You know, to once again put the human in the center and the decision maker.
Yeah, seems very much the way it should be. Hopefully the way it'll stay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I can see, Josh, you've also got your hand up as well.
Yeah, I'm just following on really. We use a lot of sort of automatic AI testing. I'm a website developer for Worcester County Council, and I'm just saying AI is great for pointing out some of those sort of big key issues. The alt text is missing here, color contrast not right there, and that's really useful. But actually, if you ever get a chance to sit next to someone who uses a screen reader or different assistive technology and just watch them and watch what they struggle with and what they find difficult, sometimes it differs with what the automated tester is going to use, but that sort of really flags the key issues, and then you can sort of go from there. If you can use a bit of both, it's really good.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, sorry, Dylan.
No, go ahead, Alice. No, yep.
I was just going to say, yeah, that having that usability testing, actually, a user with a disability, that having that feedback is so valuable on top of any sort of testing that you're doing. So even if you were fully conformant to WCAG, it's still the insights you can get from usability testing are can really improve your product as well. Thank you for sharing that. And
yeah, I was just going to say, I think WCAG and accessibility are correlated, but they're not the same thing, right? You can have something that's fully conformant with WCAG, but is difficult to use, and the opposite as well. So you know, it's we have to take different approaches, and WCAG is great because it provides very specific things that are measurable and all that, and it makes it a lot easier to turn into rules and into guidelines and approaches and patterns that you can teach people more easily and more broadly. But it doesn't replace ultimately making sure that you're working with people with disabilities and making sure that the experience is good for them.
Thanks, Ellen. And James, I can see you're off mute, and Paul as well. If again, I think as we're such a we're a smaller group today, if anyone wants to jump in at any points, do feel free.
Hiya, my name's James. I'm accessible information officer. Sorry, there's people behind me there having a wee chat in the corridor. I'm the accessible information officer for an organisation called Disability Information Scotland, and I'm in Edinburgh. This is my first. It's my first conference attended fully virtually. I normally go to these things or go to small events online. So it's been very helpful so far. Sorry, I got here a bit late, so I haven't for this particular discussion. So
I'm no problem.
Quite sure that I'm not quite sure what we were talking about as yet.
No problem. No, absolutely fine. Yeah, if any questions at any point, or if you want to share anything about any of the talks, then feel free. I can see there was also a question in the Q&A as well, which is, do you see AI helping design tools? Do you see AI helping accessibility design tools to ensure things are designed accessibly by default? Do you have any thoughts on that one, Dylan?
The short answer is yes. I think they will. I think we're just really at the beginning of being able to see what AI can help us with. So you know, some of the very kind of practical things that we do with some of our tools. So we have a Figma plugin called Axe for Designers, And some of the very practical things we're doing in that tool today is helping to annotate, to recognize and annotate user interface objects based on what they look like, and therefore help to convey that sort of information to the implementation and testing team. And that's a very simple object detection and classification approach to helping with design, right? But I know there's a lot of different organizations working on much more exciting things, and so I think we'll see a lot more over the coming year and beyond. That'll blow our minds in ways we can't even imagine today. So I think the possibilities there are exciting.
Great, and just to clarify, is that sort of a tool that you could use so designers could effectively annotate their designs and hand it over to developers to explain those accessibility interactions?
Yeah, X for designers. Yeah, it's a free Figma plugin, so anyone with a Figma account can download it and install it and start playing around with it. And it does two things. It does some testing of the design itself, and we are looking at ways we can enhance that as well. But the first area that we've actually been able to leverage AI in that particular tool is in the second set of features, which is about annotating the designs for accessibility.
Great, thanks for that, Dylan. So if we go on to talk about one of the other talks today was how AI can make education more inclusive. So in this one, the discussion was around sort of the role of AI in education. And some of the points that came out with it were that it was allowing teachers to focus more on learners, and also allowing them to kind of tailor old lesson plans to better suit learners with disabilities. And it was having that universal design approach around having a kind of more inclusive lesson plan overall as well. So for this one, Dylan, is there anything you wanted to kind of share to that around like the role of AI in education, what AI can do?
Yeah, I think it's exciting. It's also recently I did a talk at M-Enabling in the United States on AI in general and human-centric AI. And one of the things I did during the talk was just present some hypothetical scenarios to the audience and asked them whether they thought that use of AI was a good use of AI or a bad use of AI. And it was interesting to me that the scenario that I came up with around education, which was, do you think it's a good use of AI if it allowed every student to have their own personalized tutor and get personalized teaching? And that was the one idea out of all of the 10 that I presented to the audience that got the most votes. So I think what that says to me is that just generally, I think using AI in education is going to be viewed as very useful and also a very good use of AI generally. I think that's one of the first things that I think about it, and I think there is a lot of opportunity there for a lot of the reasons we've talked about already, because it can be used to make experiences and therefore lessons and education more understandable to people with different modalities of learning, and it can also be used to help to customize both the way people learn and the speed at which they're learning, and therefore allow teachers to sort of focus on the more important aspects of learning, and not have to, for example, slow down the faster students in order to have a good experience for the students that need more time to learn the material. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's really interesting. That kind of it was that there's such a positive benefit to it within education. Everyone in the room, can anyone think of any areas in education that they think AI would be really beneficial, or any areas that they think that we should be careful with as well? So any particular pitfalls?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I'd like to hear what other people think. Paul, did you want to say something?
Hi, yes. So I'm a web developer for King's College London. I think well, I haven't explored it, but I think AI tools would be quite useful for the sort of accessibility checking. So as long as you gave it a list of rules to check, I mean, at the moment we're just doing those manually of like, okay, go through with a keyboard, are links displaying a color for the focus state, right? And you could use an AI tool to go through a checklist and then, either pass or fail each checked item. And then that can come back to use a developer to go, right, let me check all the areas that were failed and then fix them, that kind of thing. That's just me thinking about my own role.
Yeah, definitely. I think you'll see more AI being used in that way to test more broadly, more independently. I think right now one of the areas that one of the approaches we've taken, and the reason we've taken that approach is just a lot of the time it's still quite difficult for the computer, even with the AI, to really tell the intent of some of the designs or the content. And so that's an area where I think the AI can present an opinion to the user and ask the user to whether they're accurate. And so you can get a lot more automation. I still think, at this point, we need to give the human the ultimate deciding power in that sort of approach.
Definitely. I think for me, just thinking about those challenges, it then prevents biases coming into that from the AI. You're then actually helping it to learn. And I think in the context of education, like, I have a 6-year-old, I think, and thinking about diagnoses and things like that and meeting children's needs. I think it's got some real great capabilities to help with that kind of learning analytics for children, so that they can have, and for educators, so that they have like that step-by-step on how to track children's progress, what activities that they're doing, to potentially help as well when there are diagnoses needed, to give examples of different types of behaviors and needs. I think there's some really powerful things around that. And in particularly being able to track progress over time, but being able to personalize those instructions and that actual learning experience for that child and for their needs. And then also basing that, like we say, not just on an AI's opinion of that, but from the teacher and how they understand and interact with that classroom setting, and then on a one-to-one setting. So I think there's some massive capabilities, especially thinking about the amount of admin, I know her teacher has to do, to track 20 different children in their class and things like that, to be able to take some of that away from them as well, so that they're able to concentrate on what is actually needed. Massive benefit.
Yeah. Actually, you touched on, and I think an interesting area that is a potential area of danger in education, and that is bias.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if, we need to be careful that we don't perpetuate the bias that might be present in materials.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that's something we need to look out for.
Definitely, and I think having rule sets around that are, especially if this comes into more standard education, especially early learning education, that there are specific rules around that, and that there are ways to disagree in that sense of what has been listed there. I know particularly, I don't know really so much in the UK, but I know in America, with it being such a big place in that sense, there's very different rules on what content can be available to children in different areas, what books are banned, what things are like that. So I think having that basic subset and the schools giving that information up front is going to be really important to make sure that they're actually putting the right guidelines in place. Whether or not people agree with them, obviously, is a different thing, but yeah.
Okay, yeah, absolutely. I wonder, I don't know, but I wonder whether anybody who's here has any knowledge about this, as to whether AI could be used to find bias in material. I mean, yeah, I'd be interested to hear whether anyone thinks that might be possible.
That if I can join in, that segues me quite neatly to some of the stuff I've been looking at around this. So I'm an independent consultant around neurodiversity, creativity, and innovation primarily. I'm also chair of neurodiverse IT within BCS, the Chartered Institute of IT here in the UK, and obviously BCS is doing a lot of work around this and the work around AI and bias, and there's both the positive and negative societal effects. I think one of the things we're really seeing in the neurodiversity area is a really quite significant risk around replicating at scale and at speed the existing biases and barriers that exist within the current systems. I think there's one of the things that we're really looking at is how to surface the individual lived experience, and where that doesn't line up with the broader models of expectation, but also automating some of that. You know, doing the advocacy. If you're disabled in any way, you spend a lot of time doing self-advocacy, which is exhausting and is its own barrier. And so looking at the ways that we can actually use this to look for systemic barriers, flaws, and biases in an automated way itself, so that we're not just surfacing this, we're not just surfacing the kind of aggregate middle of the bell curve experience every time and just thinking about that, and looking at, and on an individual level, looking at that lived experience and how we can really make sure that that is accommodated and accounted for and fits in with within this broader AI machine learning world, and making sure that we're not just narrowing it down. So yeah, I'm not sure how much I've answered the question, because this is all very open questions at the moment and how we do this. But the approach that I'm taking in some of my work is to look at individual agents that represent individual people's lived experience. And interestingly, this came up, this personalized tutoring teaching comes up. But there's also, how can you support generalized education professionals in understanding an individual's needs and understanding an individual's experience, because that's the other side of this. Yeah. And I think for me, joining up that gap is one of the best ways that we can start addressing this bias, because we then have ways of understanding that experience that the machine already understands.
Yeah, that is fascinating. Yeah, that is amazing that you're already working on that sort of thing. So do you have any experiences that you can share with us about the success of that, or is it still too early to say?
It's really too early. We've yet to build anything that works properly. I think it's all so far theoretical, and we're looking at a pilot project next year to start getting stuff in people's hands. But yeah, I for me, it's based on a lot of the fundamentally, a lot of the work that I've done is about how we automate these kind of more human social processes, and in a way that works. And so we're taking that model and applying it to this broader, to kind of this broader area this particular area. So yeah, no, nothing as yet, but hopefully soon. Yeah. And based on my own needs as well, because I'm very much in the both need this and can develop this category.
Yeah. So Alice, a few upcoming TechShare talk.
Yeah, this sounds absolutely fascinating. It's really, really interesting, and especially how it's about trying to take that lived experience of an individual and putting it into that AI format, because that's kind of not where we're at yet around that. So very interesting to hear that.
Yeah, there's been some interesting work around actually collecting those experiences. There's a project called Aut Spaces, looking at the sensory experience of autistic people in various situations. run by the Turing Institute, and that's a really cool project. And so yeah, the plan is to potentially build on that qualitative, the lived experience, because I think for me that's the really interesting next area. Is we've spoken about we've spoken quite a lot, heard quite a lot about experience so far in the overall conference, but at the moment a lot of our tools are like, okay, this color's wrong, which is really important and in aggregate does lead to experience, but there's something emergent that sits on top of all of the individual details that we haven't quite got to yet, I think. And that's the really exciting part for me. That's when we can really start to make big differences to people's experience, or even bigger differences to people's experiences with these tools.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you very much for sharing that. That's really, really interesting to hear about.
Hello,
Oh, sorry, Paul.
Sorry, could I ask a question?
Of course.
I was just question to Dylan, I think. I'm coming from I'm learning how to audit websites for accessibility, and I'm on one of your Deque courses. But I was curious about, because the AI is going to change quite rapidly how that sort of work is done and how to approach it. I'm just wondering how can I keep up to date with how things are progressing and what where I should be looking in terms of learning new skills and trying new approaches. If you would have any advice on that, that would be very helpful.
Yeah, well, first of all, congratulations on your journey, starting your journey. I hope it all works out
Thank
for
you.
you. I think there's no one answer. I think one of the best ways you can stay on top of this sort of thing is to continue to try to attend conferences like this one. There are quite a few of these. There's M-Enabling in the United States. There's CSUN. There's the AXCON conference. There's ID24. So there's a lot of and three of those conferences I just talked about are fully virtual conferences, so they're quite easy to attend. So I think that's one of the best ways to stay on top of what's going on in the industry, is just to stay in touch with the industry. There is where are you located? Are you in the UK?
I'm in the UK, yes. Yeah. I'm in Norfolk.
Yeah, I think there's a group called CAN. I can't remember what CAN stands for, but
Champions of Accessibility.
Accessibility Network, yeah.
That's another great way to stay in touch. Meetups, just following relevant people on social media, and subscribing to, for example, you could follow Deque on social media, and you'll keep up to date with what we're doing. Yeah, I think those sort of approaches are the best way to stay on top of what's going on in the industry. I don't know if Alex or anybody else has any other suggestions.
No, I'd agree with all that. Going to things like conferences and meetups, loads of them are free as well. So really definitely go to as many as you can.
The only thing I'd add is to look at at the specific groups. There are certain groups, like advocacy groups for different groups of disabled people who are also exploring this from the other side, and they often have some interesting content as well. So if there's a specific group or groups that you're interested in, there are just some that are more interested in the tech side, who are doing some really interesting stuff. So again, just not to kind of belabor a point, but the Autspaces project is partly related to Autistica in the UK. So there's but that's just an example of different groups that are looking at this in different ways.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's slightly daunting because I'm sometimes kind of approaching it as a second career, and I started doing the Trusted Tester course, which seems to teach you quite well how to kind of approach auditing. And I was curious about also the new European standards coming in next year or the year after. And it doesn't seem like Europe has an equivalent program. And and it also, seems to be a lot of change going on. So I'm just wondering how to focus my energy, my efforts, if you see what I mean. But let's see, obviously you can approach it from lots of different points of view in terms of who's using your website. And also neurodiverse is one of the harder ones to approach, and it's one of the areas where AI might be more helpful, perhaps, as it becomes more proficient at analyzing text patterns and layouts and so on. But it's all very interesting to me. So
yeah, it's definitely a lot. There's a lot going on. If you're just beginning the journey, it's going to seem a lot more overwhelming in the beginning. I find when I'm trying to get into a new area, finding one or two experts that are prolific in consuming information and then digesting that down is also a pretty good approach. Can help you at least a sort of easier way into finding the information sources that you can consume.
I find it a bit like finding stepping stones. You kind of move from one place and you find that opens a new kind of world, and then that leads you to your next place, and I try not to try and take it all in one go, I think.
There's a lot of information. There's also the newsletters you can sign up for as well. So there's one I particularly like, which is A11Y Weekly, and it's kind of a few digestible posts that you can have a look at.
Great. Thank you again. Thank you.
Thanks all. So we haven't got on to the last talk, but I believe that's all we've got time for today in this networking session. But thank you very much everyone for joining, and thank you Dylan for being on the panel as well. And there's lots of other networking sessions, so do continue the conversation in them as well.
Yeah, fantastic conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks all.
Thanks,
Enjoy
everyone.
the rest of the conference.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.